For Marx, the bourgeois is a revolutionary class. They're revolutionary in the sense that they bring into being the historical order with which most of us are familiar, what we would call democratic capitalism, or the rights associated with a bourgeois democratic order. Things like freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, secular education. He wants to know, when will the bourgeois sacrifice those things for the sake of accumulation? And to do this, he has to really theorize, what is a bourgeois revolution? And it's here that the personages of the cat become so unique. So at the risk of appearing didactic, I do want to read one section from the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, in which the cat really comes into being as a kind of historical actor who punctuates the end of the bourgeois revolution. Okay, here's Marx. Bourgeois revolutions, like those of the 18th century, rush onward rapidly from success to success. Their stage effects outbid one another. Men and things seem to be set in flaming brilliance. Ecstasy is the prevailing spirit, but they are short-lived. They reach their climax speedily. Then society relapses into a long Katzenjammer. So, the Katzenjammer, what is it? Well, a Katzenjammer is, in a sense, a cat's wail, a cat's lament. Think about the sound a cat makes when he or she is crying. Think about that piercing kind of hangover. Essentially, in fact, the Katzenjammer gets used in idiomatic German to mean a kind of hangover. But Marx has other concerns. He wants to know, why did the bourgeoisie stop being a revolutionary class? Why were they willing to elect this man, the nephew of Napoleon, who Marx says is essentially a buffoon, who is out to usurp their rights? Why would they do this? And for Marx, and this is really what he means by historical materialism. For Marx, the economic will always trump the political, right? The bourgeois are willing to sacrifice themselves. He says they will nullify their own political power to preserve their right to economic exploitation. And I really do wonder if we're in a similar moment now. This sort of caricature of an imperial buffoon. That is how Marx refers to the nephew of Napoleon, to Louis Bonaparte, right? And, I have to say, when you get deeper and deeper into this text, you really start to see historical similarities. And we shouldn't be surprised to learn that, in fact, one of Marx's most famous lines of the Constitution of History comes from the 18th Brumaire. And that is the famous line that Hegel remarks somewhere that history repeats itself, appears twice, as it were. And then Marx says he forgot to add, the first time as tragedy, the second time as farce. So for Marx, when the first Napoleon appears on the scene to end the French Revolution, that's the tragedy. When the second, or third I should say, Napoleon appears on the scene in the figure of Louis Bonaparte, that is the farce. He's not a real imperial figure, right? But he plays the part of one. This is an essentially dramatic text. And I think that we would be remiss not to ask ourselves today, 2 years after the ascension of Donald Trump, in the midst of an election, what kind of Katzenjammer is hanging over us? What are the sort of faded dreams of the revolutionary bourgeois potential that appear as a Katzenjammer that we could say are motivating us or are with us in our political moment? And what might we do to interrupt that?